Hi, my name is Julie, and on what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, my brother stood up during the wedding toast and laughed. He said, "You're marrying him for the money, obviously." And no one at the table flinched. Not my mother, not my sister. They all just smiled, like it had always been true. But the worst part? That wasn't even the real betrayal. You'll want to hear what they did next. The reception hall was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Dallas skyline, white roses spilling from glass vases, linen napkins folded like origami swans. From a distance, it looked like something out of a lifestyle magazine. Perfect, polished, pretend. I stood by the edge of the ballroom, fingers grazing the rim of my untouched champagne glass. The music, some soft jazz number, floated through the air, but it couldn't drown out the undercurrent of tension I felt crawling up my spine. I had been through enough family events to recognize that kind of silence, the kind where people smile too wide and speak too softly when you walk by. They were here, my siblings. Not one of them had said anything real to me yet, just the basics. "Congrats, Julie. You look great. So happy for you." Empty calories. I'm in my late 40s now, but I still carry the echo of who I was to them. The baby sister, the screw-up, the one who cried too easily and dreamed too loudly. But here I was, standing in a $1,000 gown, married to a man who loved me, respected me, and yes, happened to be successful. I had hoped this would be the moment, the time they'd see me differently. Finally. I scanned the room and saw Brian, my older brother, near the bar with our cousin Lila. They laughed about something, then both glanced in my direction, just a second. But enough. My stomach tightened. I looked away. When it was time for toasts, I forced my smile back on. My husband, Mark, squeezed my hand under the table. I nodded. We were okay. We were starting something good. Then Brian raised his glass. "To Julie," he began, pausing for dramatic effect. "For finally finding love. Or, at least finding someone with a great retirement plan. You're marrying him for the money, obviously." The room erupted. Some laughed because they thought they should. Some chuckled awkwardly. A few gasped. But I froze. Mark turned to me, searching my face, clearly puzzled. My cheeks burned. I nodded at him, the corners of my mouth twitching into a smile I didn't mean. My throat tightened. My ears rang. The laughter didn't stop. It dragged on, echoing in my head, getting louder than the music, louder than anything. I looked across the table at Brian. He sipped his drink like nothing happened. Just a joke. Just Brian being Brian. But it wasn't just a joke, because while everyone else laughed, my mind played reels of memories. The years I paid off Brian's mortgage when he lost his job, the groceries I bought for our parents, the birthdays I organized, the times I showed up when no one else did. I stood up, calmly, napkin still in hand, and walked out of the ballroom. The ladies' room was too bright. I blinked under the fluorescent lights and turned on the faucet. The water was cold. I washed my hands, once, twice, 3 times. It didn't help. "You're marrying him for the money," I whispered it aloud, tasting the humiliation. That's what I'd always been to them, an easy target. Brian had always treated me like the emotional mess, the liability. When we were kids, he'd roll his eyes when I cried. Now he just used microphones. I stared at my reflection, foundation cracking near my jawline, lipstick just slightly off. A quote I'd read somewhere flickered in my mind. "People who think you owe them are often the ones you once rescued." That was it, wasn't it? I had bailed them out so many times that they believed it was my role. Not a gift, not kindness, just what I was supposed to do. And now that I'd chosen myself, chosen happiness, they couldn't stand it. I didn't want to go back out there, not for cake, not for dancing, not for another fake smile. But I did. I straightened my spine, fixed my lipstick, and walked back into the noise. Mark saw me first. He reached for my hand, his eyes full of quiet concern. "You okay?" he asked gently. I nodded. It was just a joke. He didn't believe me, but he let it go. I felt Brian's eyes on me. He raised his glass again, this time just a small sip. No words, but he knew. He saw what he'd done. And then, a tap on my shoulder. It was Mrs. Thompson, an old family friend who'd known me since I was a teenager. "That wasn't right," she whispered. "He meant that." My stomach dropped. It wasn't just a careless comment. It was calculated. It was a hit. And I'd been standing there hoping, still hoping, that maybe this time would be different. But it wasn't. I smiled at Mrs. Thompson and nodded. "Thank you," I whispered. Inside, something shifted. Something cold and final. This wasn't a celebration. Not for them. It was a warning, a reminder. Stay in your place. But I wouldn't. Not this time. I slipped out the side door of the ballroom, into the garden that wrapped around the venue like a quiet, forgotten wing. The night air was still, just cool enough to bite the sweat gathering at the base of my neck. My heels clicked sharply against the stone path, each step sounding too loud in the hush. Somewhere behind me, the jazz still played, the laughter carried, lighter now, freer, like I was never part of it to begin with. The hedge lights cast a soft yellow halo on the path, but everything in me was hard and gray. I wrapped my arms around myself, but not for warmth. Just containment. I didn't want to break open. Not here. Off to my left, a few cousins stood in a half circle, talking low. One of them glanced at me and quickly turned back to the group. No wave, no smile, just a flicker of eyes like I was the stain on a white dress. I leaned on the back of a metal chair and let it all sink in. Brian's comment wasn't just a slip of the tongue. No. He knew exactly what he was doing. That wasn't a tease. That was a move. It started to click, the pieces rearranging in my mind. The last few months, the strange silences at family dinners, the way I was conveniently left out of planning calls, passive jabs masked as jokes. I had told myself they were just adjusting to the new marriage, but now I saw it differently. This wedding wasn't a celebration for them. It was a staged production, and I was the final act in a play I never auditioned for. "Julie?" A voice, soft and uncertain. I turned. It was Valerie, my second cousin, always polite, always on the edge of things. She stood with her clutch pressed to her chest like a shield. "I don't want to cause trouble," she started, her eyes darting to the glass doors behind me. "But I overheard something." I didn't speak, just nodded once. Let her take the lead. "At the rehearsal dinner," she said, "Brian was talking to Danielle. They were laughing about what he'd say during the toast, said it had to be short and sharp, said it'd be too good not to use." My chest didn't move, like my lungs forgot their job. "He said," Valerie continued, lowering her voice, "that if he framed you as a gold digger early, people would always wonder, even if it wasn't true, that it'd preempt the sympathy vote." His words. I stared at her. Not shocked, not really, just cold, like ice creeping along the inside of my skin. "I wasn't sure if I should say anything," she admitted. "But that wasn't just a slip-up. That was rehearsed." I nodded. Still didn't cry. Couldn't. There wasn't enough water left in me tonight. "I've always admired how you carry yourself," she added, her voice steady now. "You didn't deserve that." "Thank you," I said. Just those two words. Anything more might crack the surface. I walked back inside through the same doors I'd come out of. But something in me had shifted. Like I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. From across the room, I spotted Brian laughing with another cousin, his hand resting on the bar, relaxed. Danielle beside him, whispering something. I watched the way their heads tilted, the smugness in their posture, like people who believed they'd already won. I glanced around, noticed how no one looked surprised, like they all knew the script, like they were just watching it unfold. I thought back to when I got divorced, how no one from the family called to help, but they called each other. They had opinions. I was making a scene, not trying hard enough, always emotional. That's what they do. Paint you with the brush they like best, then blame you for the color. Blood makes you related, loyalty makes you family, and loyalty had been a one-way street for far too long. Mark was chatting with the bartender, oblivious. I almost envied that. That he could stand in this room and feel like the people here were genuinely celebrating with us. I stared at my reflection in the glass of the cocktail display behind the bar, just for a second. And in that second, I saw someone I didn't recognize. Not weak, not broken, just alert. How long had they been building this story? How many jokes did I let pass because I didn't want to be the problem? I thought of being 9, dreaming about being a lawyer, and Brian laughing in front of our parents. She can't even finish her math homework. Who's gonna let her argue in court? Everyone laughed. So did I. Back then. I'm not laughing anymore. I found a seat near the window and sat, letting the noise dull behind me. I didn't want revenge. That's not what this was. I wanted truth. I wanted my story back. Maya Angelou once said, "When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time." I'd been giving second chances like candy at Halloween. Not anymore. I would start paying attention, start collecting facts, not just feelings, because facts make people listen. I glanced across the room and caught Valerie watching me, not out of pity, out of something else. Maybe understanding, maybe respect. And that's when I remembered the voicemail I'd almost deleted earlier that morning. I didn't wait for Mark. I told him I needed air, space, time to process, and I did. But really, I needed distance, from everyone, from the whole thing. So I left alone, slipping into my car before the last toast had even been made. The drive home was a blur of quiet streets and blinking lights, my hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary. The roads were nearly empty, just like I needed them to be. Dallas had this way of staying warm late into the night. Windows down didn't help much, but the wind on my face at least reminded me I was still here, still real. My mind was loud, though, replaying Valerie's words over and over, like a scratched CD. That wasn't a joke. It was a rehearsed line. Who plans something like that for a wedding toast? I kept trying to count backward, remember every strange comment or dinner where I left feeling not right. I'd ignored so much under the umbrella of family. But that umbrella had holes. It had always had holes. Then my phone buzzed in the cup holder. Voicemail. I glanced down. No name on the screen, but I knew the number. I hadn't saved it, but I'd never forgotten it either. Brian. Time-stamped 2 hours before the ceremony. For a second, I thought of ignoring it. Another second passed, and I considered deleting it outright. I didn't need more poison, but my thumb didn't listen to my gut. I tapped play. At first, just background noise, silverware, clinking glasses. Then his voice, casual, like he was talking over a steak. "She's really going through with it," Brian said, almost laughing. "Wearing that dress like she's starring in some Hallmark movie. She's selling her dignity for a backyard pool and a man who drinks wine like he's in Paris." Then another voice, Nancy's. "Well, at least she picked a quiet one this time. Easier to control." Brian chuckled again. "Wait till I drop the line at the mic. Just watch her fake that smile like she always does." Oscar-worthy. The message ended with their laughter. I sat there frozen, my hands still hovering over the screen like it had just burned me. But it hadn't. Not enough. So I hit play again. I listened to it 3 more times. I didn't yell, didn't cry, didn't even blink. Just stared out the windshield like the glass could give me an answer. And then, without meaning to, my brain reached back. Decades back? I was 13. Backyard BBQ at my parents' house. I'd just won an award for a writing contest at school. They let me read part of it out loud. Everyone clapped. Everyone but Brian. He leaned toward our neighbor and said, not even bothering to whisper, "She's not that smart, just good at pleasing teachers." I laughed along back then. I even made a joke about being the teacher's pet. But it stuck. That sentence, that tone, it curled around my confidence and never let go. And here we were again, different setting, same story. Some jokes aren't jokes. They're daggers wrapped in paper napkins. I looked at the phone again, not with fear, with purpose. I forwarded the voicemail to a secure folder in my email, titled it, "In Case They Deny." Then I opened the Notes app and began typing. Names, events, dates, times. This wasn't about rage, it was about record keeping. I thought briefly about posting it, some anonymous account, let the world hear it all. But no, that would come later. First, I wanted to look him in the eye, let him know I knew, watch what he did with that. They'd always treated me like I didn't know how to handle truth, like I wasn't strong enough to see things clearly. But I was seeing now, in high definition. They've underestimated me for the last time. I took a breath, a deep one. Then I turned off the ignition, stepped out of the car, and caught my reflection in the side mirror. My face looked older than it had that morning, not tired, sharpened. I wasn't a joke, I wasn't their story anymore. I didn't sleep much. Every time I shut my eyes, Brian's voice crept in, the chuckle, the smug tone, the words like sandpaper against skin. That voicemail wasn't just proof, it was a mirror, and I couldn't unsee what it showed me. By 7:30 a.m., I was dressed, no makeup, hair tied back. I poured coffee, but it went cold on the counter. My appetite had vanished, replaced by a sharp clarity I hadn't felt in years. I opened my phone and stared at the blank message thread to Brian. Typed 3 different texts, deleted each one. This wasn't something I was going to handle over a screen. I messaged him. "Cafe? Just us." He replied, "Sure, 10. We'd met there dozens of times. Birthdays, casual catch-ups, even after our parents' funeral. Familiar table by the window. But this time, it felt like walking into court. He was already there when I arrived. Button-down shirt, sunglasses tucked into the collar like a man without a care in the world. He smiled like everything was fine. "Morning, Jules. You sleep off the party yet?" I didn't smile. Just sat across from him, pulled out my phone, and hit play. He blinked once. His jaw tightened by the time I reached. Watch her fake that smile like she always does. Then the silence. "You recorded me?" "No," I said quietly. "You did." He looked around the cafe, like someone might be watching. "It was a joke." "No," I said, steady. "It was exposure." He leaned back, arms crossed, his face shifting into something colder. "So what's the plan, Julie? You gonna post it? Make a big scene?" I didn't answer that directly. Instead, I leaned in and told him plainly, "If you ever humiliate me again, at a family dinner, online, at a funeral, wherever, I won't just release this voicemail. I'll tell the stories you hope I've forgotten. I'll say names, dates, what you said, what you did." He let out this forced laugh. "You've always been dramatic, and you've always counted on me staying quiet. People will side with me," he said. "You know that, right?" I stood. "We'll see." I didn't touch my coffee, didn't say goodbye. I walked out and didn't look back. By that evening, I knew he hadn't taken me seriously. My phone rang just as I was cleaning up dinner. "Nancy." "What the hell did you say to Brian?" I opened Facebook. My stomach dropped. Brian had posted some vague status. "Some people can't take a joke. Sad when family forgets loyalty." That was enough. The comments rolled in fast, people piling on, some saying I was sensitive, others hinting maybe I'd changed since getting remarried. My Aunt Marie chimed in, "Maybe this is about money after all. Let's be honest." But it wasn't all noise. One message came from a childhood friend I hadn't spoken to in years. "I always wondered why he picked on you. Glad you're speaking up." Another from someone I barely remembered. "That man has needed humbling for decades. You okay?" There it was, the split. For the first time, the cracks in the family mask weren't invisible anymore. They were public, raw, real. Then I got a message from Marla. She and I had been close in high school. She'd become a social worker. We'd lost touch after college, but somehow she'd watched the wedding live stream. Her message was long, thoughtful. It read, "I saw the joke. Saw how you smiled through it. That wasn't strength. That was survival. You've been surviving him your whole life. I just hope you know, not saying something now doesn't protect anyone. It only makes room for more." I stared at those words longer than I thought I would. She added, "They're not defending Brian. They're defending the system that lets him be Brian." I screenshotted the message, saved it in my phone under a folder named Reminders. because she was right. I hadn't broken anything. I'd just held up a mirror, and they didn't like what they saw. It was late afternoon when I pulled into the driveway of my childhood home. The place looked the same, down to the rust stain beneath the mailbox, but it felt like I was stepping into a stranger's house. My stomach was tight the whole ride over. I hadn't even turned off the engine before I saw it through the glass of the front door. A big, neatly wrapped box with a white bow, my name written in careful script across the tag. My mother greeted me without looking up from the paper she was folding. "Welcome home," she said flatly, as if she were announcing the weather. I didn't respond, just picked up the box. It had weight, not just physically, the kind of weight you feel in your chest before you open something you already know you shouldn't. The floorboards creaked beneath me as I walked upstairs. That old sound used to mean comfort, now it just echoed back my dread. I set the box on the edge of the bed I hadn't slept in since college, peeled back the wrapping slowly. A velvet case. I opened it. Inside was a gold locket, antique, detailed engraving, soft patina, exactly the one I used to admire in the glass case of the jewelry cabinet when I was maybe 10. Attached was a note in my mother's hand. "For new beginnings. Love, Mom." But the back of the locket told another story. Madeline Reed. It took a second to register. Madeline. My sister-in-law. Reed. Her husband. My brother. Not me. The locket was never meant for me. Or rather, it once was, before it was reassigned. I remember now, being told back then it didn't suit me, that it was too delicate. I thought I'd imagined that, but this wasn't a mistake. It was a message, wrapped and ribboned to look like love. I didn't cry, didn't yell. I just walked back downstairs, the velvet box still in my hand. I found Alma in the sitting room, legs crossed, a novel propped up like she was the matriarch of a damn storybook. I held the locket out. "Why did it say Madeline and Reed?" She looked up slowly, not startled, not defensive, just annoyed at the interruption. "You always need something to feel special," she said, as if that was my crime, needing to matter. "Or so you think," I replied. There was a pause, something flickered in her eyes. Then the book snapped shut. "Be careful what you read into my actions," she warned, like she was scolding a child for eavesdropping. And with that, she left the room. Just like that. I stared at the locket. Sat there a long time, not really seeing the room. My childhood piano was still there in the corner, now mostly a stand for photos that didn't include me. I wasn't even angry, just hollow. But I knew one thing. That locket was going into the file. I went back upstairs, pulled out a small cardboard box from my bag. On the lid, I wrote in Sharpie, "Truths I Own." Inside, I started placing everything I'd once ignored, copies of texts I saved, notes from years past. The voicemail was backed up already. Now I added the locket. This wasn't paranoia anymore. It was evidence. I thought about Brian's words, Valerie's confession, even the way my mother looked through me just now, like I was a guest overstaying my welcome. Tonight, I'd make a list. Every gift that wasn't, every invitation I never got, every birthday that was conveniently forgotten, every time I was told I was too sensitive when what I really was awake. They wanted me quiet. They'd called it love. But I finally saw it for what it was. After the gift, after Alma's non-answer, after every silence that had become its own language in this family, I needed air, not clean air, just space to breathe. I stayed behind as dinner plates were cleared, walking out to the terrace alone. Lanterns swayed gently from the pergola, glowing like tired fireflies. Guests hovered between conversations and refilled drinks. I leaned against the railing, trying to anchor myself in the cool air, but the tightness in my chest didn't budge. Inside, Maddie and Reed huddled near the dessert table, whispering. He glanced toward me. She didn't. They looked like two people discussing a strategy, not a marriage. I felt it. This wasn't over. I closed my eyes and repeated a line I'd been whispering all week. Silence doesn't mean weakness. I wasn't sure I believed it, but I said it again anyway. The buzz of the crowd rose a notch. Owen, out of nowhere, climbed the small platform that had held a string quartet earlier. He tapped his glass with a spoon, voice steady but too loud for the moment. "I know today isn't about us," he began, "but I wanted to take a minute to make sure Julie knows, in front of everyone, that I'm still here, that I still choose her." There were polite gasps, a few coos. I froze. He continued, "Because let's be honest, folks might think otherwise, especially with all that's been going around." That's when the air changed. It wasn't love. It wasn't devotion. It was damage control. He smiled at me like a hero. But my spine went cold. Reed's chair screeched as he stood abruptly. His water glass toppled, crashing to the stone. Every conversation stopped. "Don't make this spectacle about you," he shouted. People flinched. Some looked away. I didn't move. "You always need a stage. Always the victim. Always twisting the truth just enough to make it stick," he said. He didn't look drunk, just enraged. "This family's got a history, sure," he added, scanning the crowd. "But this is manipulation." Maddie stood behind him now, arms crossed, watching me, unblinking. I stayed in my chair, my fingers dug into the napkin in my lap. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. He stormed off, muttering something about decency. I didn't follow. No one did. The laughter didn't return. Not really. Later, after the tables were cleared and the music softened again, I sat alone near the garden edge. A string of lights blinked above me like a signal I couldn't decode. I replayed Owen's proposal. I realized then, he didn't do it for me. He did it to shut down the whispers, to make me look claimed, stable, contained. And Reed's outburst? It wasn't just anger, it was a warning. I opened my phone. I had a folder of screenshots, voicemails, a few emails I'd saved, even back when I didn't know why. I started a new file. Labeled it full account. Then I opened a blank note and began typing. It wasn't a letter of confession. It was a timeline, a record, a map. "They think this is about pride," I wrote. "They're wrong. It's about justice." I paused to save the note. That's when I saw it. Mounted above the doorframe nearby, half hidden behind ivy. A CCTV camera, pointed straight at me. The morning sun filtered through the blinds, cutting across the mess on my kitchen table. Half-eaten toast, a mug of coffee gone cold, my phone lighting up every few seconds. Text after text. Some checking in, most silent. And those were the ones that bruised more than any insult. The silence of people who saw what happened and said nothing. Then came the voice memo. From an old friend who'd stayed late after the wedding. Just a whisper. "You need to hear this." I hit play. It was Maddie. Her voice, unmistakable. Light, mocking. "She's a professional widow in training," she said, laughing. "All that sad-eyed crap, she's just good at making people feel sorry for her." Reed chuckled in the background. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just lay there, flat on my back, staring at the ceiling fan. And I thought, for the first time with absolute clarity, this wasn't about misunderstanding. It wasn't about family dynamics. It was cruelty, calculated, rehearsed, deliberate. I got up, showered, dressed without hesitation, and printed the transcript. By 10 a.m., I was pulling into the driveway of my parents' estate, the same one where I'd smiled through years of tight-lipped brunches and too sweet mimosas, only this time, I wasn't here to smile. The gravel crunched under my flats. I didn't walk fast. I didn't rehearse out loud. Just repeated in my head. If you stay calm, they'll hear every word. That was my goal. Not to win. Just to be heard. The brunch was already underway in the garden. White tablecloths, pastel flowers, an ice bucket clinking with champagne bottles. From a distance, it looked like grace. Up close, it felt like a waiting room before surgery. I took my seat. No one asked where I'd been. Reed stayed on the far end, sunglasses on, pretending I didn't exist. Maddie was mid-story, something about a neighbor's dog, and when I sat down, she kept going. Too loud, too fast. A smirk playing at her mouth. Mom poured orange juice like it was communion. Dad nodded in my direction, then looked away. Owen wasn't there. No one brought up the blow-up from last night, so I did. Midway through fruit salad and second pours of coffee, I set down my fork and said, plainly, I heard a recording last night. Forks paused. Cups hovered. I looked at Maddie, right at her. You called me a professional widow in training, I said. A beat. Then Maddie laughed. Oh, come on! Julie, are we really? Reed cut in. If you're trying to make this about you again. I didn't flinch. I reached into my purse and slid the transcript across the table. You want to keep going? I asked quietly. The transcript sat there. No one touched it. Mom's face fell. Her napkin dropped from her lap. Dad stood up and walked into the house without a word. The guests who weren't family started checking their phones. One woman mouthed to another, It's true? I didn't get up. I didn't raise my voice. I sat, spine straight, hands folded. I married for love, I said. Can you say the same about how you treat people? No one answered. Maddie looked like she might cry. Reed looked like he wanted to run. That silence, it didn't feel like defeat. It felt like power. And for the first time in this entire mess, I realized truth wasn't something I needed them to believe. It was something I needed to stop burying. I stood, tucked the transcript back into my bag, and walked toward the front of the house. By the door, just past the hydrangeas, stood Owen. Waiting. In his hand, something small. I didn't know what yet. But I didn't stop walking. I had barely stepped out of my car when I saw him. Owen stood by my front door, folder in hand, shoulders stiff like a soldier who knew his orders were about to be challenged. He didn't wave, didn't smile, just said, Can we talk? I didn't answer, just unlocked the door and let him in. The house felt colder than usual. Or maybe it was just me. We walked to the kitchen, where the smell of morning coffee still lingered. It used to be our favorite spot. Burnt toast, mismatched mugs, those quiet Sunday mornings when we didn't need words. Now, the silence between us was something entirely different. He placed the folder on the counter, but didn't open it. My eyes caught the logo stamped in the corner, my brother Reed's law firm. A wave of nausea hit before he even spoke. I should have told you earlier, he began, voice low. There were agreements, months ago, before we got engaged. He kept going, carefully, like each word was a step through a minefield. Reed had approached him, he said, with opportunities. He framed it as family synergy, financial cooperation, long-term vision, estate positioning. I listened, though it all sounded like business school jargon trying to dress up betrayal in a nice suit. You thought marrying into the family came with perks? I asked. He shook his head. It wasn't like that. I just wanted to make sure there wouldn't be tension later, about assets, inheritances. I was trying to be practical. I stared at him. Did you ever love me for me, Owen? That pause, that 1 second too long, it said more than any answer could have. I leaned back, eyes on the ceiling. Of course, Reed didn't just torment me for sport. He turned it into strategy. And Owen, he didn't just fall for it. He signed on the dotted line. All that time, I said quietly, I thought I was being dramatic, emotional, oversensitive. Turns out I was just underestimated. I didn't mean to hurt you, he said. But you did. Silence again. He looked smaller now, not physically, but as a man, as a partner. I stood up, not shaking, not yelling, just done. Leave the folder, take everything else, and go. He didn't argue right away, just looked at me like he was hoping I'd soften. I didn't. He tried once more. Your brother, he manipulated both of us. No, I said. Manipulation only works on the willing. That broke him, or maybe freed him. Either way, he turned, walked to the door, and left. The folder stayed. I sat at the table alone, opened it, page after page, transactions, legal memos, trust alignment documents. My name reduced to a line item. This wasn't heartbreak, this was clarity. I poured myself a glass of wine. Not to forget, but to mark the moment. Closure, not escape. The weight didn't vanish. It loosened, like someone finally cutting the rope from my chest. Knot by knot. No more masks, I whispered. No more performances. This time, I meant it. I walked into the office, pulled open the drawer where I kept my legal pads, and began drafting a letter. Not to Owen, to a lawyer. The morning air was still when I pulled into Grandma's driveway. No music, no distractions, just the quiet hum of tires on gravel and a knot in my chest I hadn't noticed until I stopped the engine. She was already standing at the door, didn't say a word when I stepped out, just opened her arms, and I let go, of pride, of restraint, of the habit of holding it all in. I cried, but not from grief, not anymore. It was a release, like letting out air that had been stuck in my lungs for years. She brewed coffee like always, slow and methodical, then handed me a tissue without asking a single question. That's how she was, never rushed emotion, never judged it. I figured you'd come, she said gently. Heard the family's been loud. We talked, not in circles, not looking for blame, just truth. She spoke about how women in this family have always been handed roles like they're heirlooms, decorative, restrictive, rarely chosen. I told her I wasn't angry anymore, just tired of being underestimated. Then she reached into a drawer and pulled out a letter, yellowed at the corners, folded more times than it should have been. Your father wrote this, she said. Never found the right time to give it to you. I read it on her porch. Didn't move for a long while. His handwriting was shaky but full of intent. He wrote about regret, about fear, about watching the way Reed and I grew apart, and most of all, about his wish that I never let anyone tell me who I was supposed to be. That letter didn't break me. It steadied me. Later that afternoon, I packed my things and hugged her tighter than I had in years. On the drive back, I rolled the windows down, let the wind touch parts of me I had forgotten. At home, I opened the closet and pulled out the wedding dress. It wasn't pain that hit me. It was perspective. I folded it slowly, placed it in a box, taped it shut. It was never going to be worn again. Not because I was bitter, but because I was done dressing up for roles that didn't fit. The next morning, I sat at my desk and made calls. First to the lawyer, cutting off every financial tie that had my name in someone else's handwriting. Then a letter to Reed, formal, firm, and legal. No more veiled boundaries, just lines in ink. I blocked Owen's number. Not as revenge, not even out of hurt. I just didn't need the noise. My peace mattered more. That afternoon, I found an old journal buried beneath a stack of bridal magazines. I tore out every page and started fresh. My handwriting looked different now. It carried less fear. I am not broken, I wrote. I was bent, and now I've stood back up. Somewhere in the rhythm of that pen, I felt something I hadn't in months, myself. I spent the weekend reacquainting with joy, stopped by a small bookstore I used to love, browsed the shelves like I had nowhere to be. A woman nearby, maybe in her 60s, overheard me politely declining a wedding catalog offer. She smiled. Honey, peace looks good on you. I smiled back, not out of politeness, but because it was true. Later that week, Grandma invited me to her women's circle, a gathering of stories, not pity. These women had lived, lost, learned. I sat quietly at first, then I spoke, and no one tried to fix me. They just nodded. I learned something sitting there in that circle. Healing isn't about having all the answers. It's about giving yourself permission to move forward, even without them. A few days later, I hosted dinner. Just a few friends. No big speeches, no forced laughter. Just music low in the background and food passed without expectation. After they left, I lit a candle. Not for ambiance, but for intention. I sat on the couch, opened the journal again, and flipped to the second page. I reread a line from my father's letter. Don't let fear dress up as loyalty. I underlined it. Then, at the top of the page, I wrote, This is not an ending, it's a rerouting, with better company ahead. And I meant it.